Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Be Like Christ for our Bible study through each chapter of the Bible in 5 minutes. Today we're talking about Genesis chapter 14, and if you want all the information that's going to be presented in this video, if you like it in a free PDF that you can use, write down notes on, print out, whatever, it's available on our website. There's a link down in the description, and when our physical book comes out with all this information in it, there will be a link down in the description as well. So check that if you're watching this sometime in the future. So Genesis 14, let's answer our who, what, when, where, why, and application questions. So let's start with the when. When did the events of chapter 14 take place? Well, this would have been between the years when our main character, Abram, was somewhere between 75 years old and 100 years old. That would make this approximately somewhere between 1921 BC and 1896 BC. In terms of our main characters, we just mentioned Abram. He was a very special man in God's story. God made him some promises that he was going to make him a great nation, give him lots of children, and that his children, through them, all the nations of the earth were going to be blessed. Then we've got Lot. Lot was Abram's nephew, and he lived near or in the city of Sodom, which will become important throughout the next couple chapters. The next group of characters is 9 warring kings. So there were 5 kings who allied themselves, and they fought against a group of 4 kings who had allied themselves, and we'll talk about more of that in the outline section. Then our final character is a guy named Melchizedek, kind of a mysterious character. He's mentioned both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. He is described as the king of Salem and priest of God Most High. Where did the events of chapter 14 play out? Well, the main battle that we're going to talk about in chapter 14 occurred in the Valley of Shaveh. Lot, Abraham's nephew, is going to get kidnapped in this chapter, or taken captive, and Abram is going to have to pursue his kidnappers all the way from the Oaks of Mamre, which is in Hebron, up to Dan, and then all the way up north of Damascus, and we'll talk about all that in a little bit. So don't worry if you don't know what all that is about. And then at the end of the chapter, Melchizedek meets Abram in a place called the Valley of Shaveh, I don't know, the King's Valley. And nobody knows exactly where that was, but a lot of people suspect, a lot of historians think that it may have been in one of the valleys that surrounded the south or east of Jerusalem, either the Hinnom Valley or the Kidron Valley. And so now for our outline, the first section I've got is verses 1 through 16. Abram saves Lot after he's taken captive. So chapter 14 starts off with a war and with a specific battle in that war. 4 kings allied themselves against 5 kings, and they were fighting back and forth. The group of 4 kings consisted of these guys, and forgive me for butchering their names: Amraphel of Shinar, Arioch of Elasar, Chedorlaomer of Elam, and Tidal of Goyim. So that's the group of 4. Now the group of 5 consisted of Bera of Sodom, that's where Lot lived, Birsha of Gomorrah, Shinab of Admah, Shemeber of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, or Zoar. His name is not mentioned. The war started when the 5 kings rebelled against Chedorlaomer, who they had served for 12 years. One of the key battles took place in the Valley of Shaveh. It was when the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah fought against Chedorlaomer. Unfortunately for them, they lost, and the king of Sodom and Gomorrah had to flee. Their cities were taken captive, and Lot, who lived in the city of Sodom, he was taken as a prisoner. One of the survivors of the battle went to the Oaks of Mamre, where Abram was, and told him that Lot had been taken captive. So Abram gathered 318 trained men from his own household, and he pursued Lot's captors all the way to a place north of there known as Dan. He overtook Lot's captors, he defeated them in battle, and then he chased them even further north, all the way to the north side of Damascus, to a place known as Hobah. And after he was contented, Abram brought Lot and all of his possessions back to Canaan. And then our second section and last section, verses 17 through 24, Abram meets Melchizedek. Bera, the king of Sodom, and Melchizedek, the king of Salem, met Abraham after he returned from saving his nephew. Melchizedek is described as a king and, as we mentioned, as the priest of God Most High. Melchizedek blessed Abraham, and Abraham in turn gave Melchizedek a tenth of all of the things that he possessed. Now Bera, the king of Sodom, he offered to give Abraham all of the spoils of the battle. But Abraham refused them because he didn't want it to be said that the king of Sodom had made him rich. And so that is Genesis chapter 14. Abram brings his nephew home safe and sound. Now let's talk about an application. In our day, the terms patriarch and patriarchy are usually used in a negative light, as if those ideas are a bad thing. But Genesis chapter 14 portrays a patriarch, namely Abram, in a positive and godly way. A patriarch is a man who leads and protects his household. A real patriarch is a man who leads and protects his household and fulfills that duty even when it requires great personal sacrifice. It isn't immediately clear until you take a look at a map of Hebron, Dan, and Damascus that in order to save his nephew, Abram had to chase down his enemies for approximately 150 miles. Certainly that wasn't an easy thing to do, probably not a thing that Abram really wanted to do. It would have been easier for him just to stay home and let Lot go off into captivity. There was also danger involved because there was a battle that had to be fought. Abram's example teaches modern men that leading a household is not commanding other people to do all the things that you want done while you lay back in ease. Leading like Abram and like Jesus means providing and protecting for those in your care, even at great expense to your comfort and your safety.